Hello and welcome back to the World Championship in Through the Ages. Today we have the last game of the group ahead of us, and sadly after the end of the last video you know that it isn't possible for me any longer to win the group. I can still reach 23 points, the same amount as Fjantarik has, but sadly he wins the tiebreaker against me. But while I don't have a chance to win the group any longer, Gandin still has, meaning that with the last game that we are taking a look at today, it will be decided whether Fjantarik or Gandin will be able to win the group. And while we know now that I don't have any chance to win the group any longer for most of the game, that wasn't clear. And also, even when it was clear, I'm still very motivated, of course, to win every game for the clicker rating, which I lost quite a bit over the recent months, and also to maybe be in a better seeding basket for the lower bracket groups of stage 5. So still an important game for me as well. And now without further ado, we're gonna take a look at the game. In this game I am playing in the second position, and first of all we can take a look at the leaders and wonders. And while in the last two-player games of the group, a lot evolved around Shakespeare being the game. In the first one, Shakespeare being extremely strong for Cogito. In the last one, at least there was a big the printing presses were quite contested, but now there's no Shakespeare, no Gordy, no Darwin, so printing presses are probably a lot weaker than they were in the two-player games before. But there is Bach as a very strong culture leader. There is also the Hollywood Marlene Dietrich, so in this game maybe dramas or theaters in general could be more important. We also have Sid Meier and Bill Gates for some lab synergy. Pierre is there, so arenas could be interesting. Gandhi is there to potentially hide behind. We have the internet together with Pierre that can be very strong. We also have a space flight. We have all the three military action leaders in H2 with Robespierre, Napoleon, and Catherine. There is Maria Theresa, but no ocean liner service. There's James Cook, but no Suez Canal. There's the railroad, but no what. There's Harvard College as a strong economical wonder. In H1 we have the two strength wonders with the Meiji Castle and Great Wall. The Machu Picchu is there. We have one military action leader with Jan Žižka, Nostradamus, and Genghis Khan to help out with the strength. We have Columbus as a nice transitional leader, however with no Suez Canal being in the game, and then Leonardo for some lab and printing press energy. Also the Acropolis is in the game, but not on the row yet, which is also always an important factor to consider in a two-player game. And while they are not the most culture leader, with Bach being in the game, it could still be quite strong to have the Acropolis. Gandin is in first position, and he just starts with taking Sun Tzu. He can either take Sun Tzu or Moses or a bunch of yellow cards, and with that I do think Sun Tzu, especially with playing in first position, should be a very fine choice. Now it's my turn, and I just picked the Engineering Genius. I could of course maybe take the Colossus, making it that Gandin can't go for Sun Tzu plus Colossus, and I'm playing with Colossus against Sun Tzu, making it that I'm nicely prepared for a bunch of events that he could potentially put into the deck. But there's no Suez Canal in there, and I just didn't like it too much. Also, it could be that I then have to go for Cleopatra the next turn, depending on what leaders are revealed, and Cleopatra with the Colossus just doesn't work that nicely. I could just go for Moses plus Richland or Frugality or something like this. But Moses, I'm not the biggest fan. There's the chance that maybe Hippocrates or Confucius could be revealed as Cleopatra coming down the row, who I can maybe aim towards. So with that, I also didn't want to go for Moses, and if I don't take the Engineering Genius, then Gandin might have a shot at getting Colossus plus the Engineering Genius, and I just didn't want to give that card to him, so I just go with the Engineering Genius here. Now I was interested to see whether Gandin will maybe go for the Colossus and try to go for a bit of an aggressive game, or if he wants to do something different. Also I was interested to see whether the Acropolis will come out of the deck or not, and the Acropolis doesn't come out, but the Stonehenge, and Gandin isn't willing to go for the Colossus, instead takes the Urban Growth, maybe aiming towards getting the Stonehenge at the next turn. And that means that at my turn there are two wonders available, the Colosseum for one civil action and the Stonehenge for two civil actions. While it can sometimes be strong to skip the HA wonder, in this game there's no Silk Road, no Forbidden City, no Universitas. I don't have a leader available that gives additional science, so I didn't really like it to skip the HA wonder here. I thought about just going for Clio, electing her, building the second lab, taking Colosseum, and then at the next turn, if I'm willing to invest all of my 4 civil actions into it, I could then increase my population, build my third mine, build the first step of the Colosseum with the Engineering Genius, and the second one for free with the additional resource from Clio. But it would take all of my civil actions, and I just don't like the Colosseum that much in two-player games. It just doesn't produce any passive culture, and you really need to make use out of the military action, otherwise it's just maybe not doing that much. And with that, I actually was willing here to go for the Stonehenge for 2 civil actions, which is also definitely not ideal, but it makes sure that Gandin isn't able to go for the Stonehenge. Now he either has to go for the Colosseum, and maybe with Sun Tzu there is at least a little bit of synergy, maybe he can go for a bit of a military game, but I was still a lot more happy to see him with the Colosseum than with the Stonehenge, and with the Stonehenge maybe I have a shot at just nicely being able to invest the science. We have seen in the last game that it can also backfire having the Stonehenge in a 2-player game, but I still liked it more than going for the Colosseum and giving the Stonehenge to Gandin. And while I can't go for Cleopatra, I can at least go for Hippocrates. I can't go for him this turn, but maybe it's not too bad to delay Hippocrates. There's no Saladin, who's maybe the best early replacement leader. There is no Nostradamus, but apart from maybe I don't have to be worried that I get a very early H1 leader that I want to elect immediately, and then it could be annoying to not have collected the tokens already. So with that, it's maybe fine to go for Hippocrates at the next turn, and then overall I just like the look of this more than going for Cleopatra and Colosseum. And then with my last civil action, I will just increase my population, as I have to be civil action efficient after having taken a 4-step wonder for 2 civil actions here. I draw the heavy cavalry in a colonization card. There is Genghis Khan in the game, so the heavy cavalry could be interesting, especially if Gandin tries to go for something military heavy. Development of warfare is revealed. Gandin is willing to take the free warrior, takes the Colosseum, doesn't want to skip the HA wonder, and then he builds 2 stages, and with having built a second warrior, he doesn't have a free population to build a second lab. With that, is willing to delay the science, but of course has the second warrior here. Then he is interestingly taking the cultural heritage, maybe just wants to have a little bit of additional science available after having skipped the second lab. I still was a little bit surprised, because I do think the frugality could have been an interesting pick here, making sure that at the next turn he has the ability to build a second lab, to not delaying his science any longer, and then he maybe could get the additional science from having that additional population instead of having to play the cultural heritage. That of course makes it that the swordsman fall down to 1 civil action. Maybe he didn't want to give this card to me, but it's maybe also not too important, so I was a little bit surprised, but the additional science of course could be valuable. Maybe he doesn't want to commit to the second lab anyway in the near future, so but I thought the frugality could maybe be an interesting pick as an alternative here. I will also take the free warrior. That of course also means for me that I have to delay the second lab for a little while, but I'm playing against Sun Tzu. There is still the potential for the game to become quite military heavy if maybe Gandin wants to make use out of the Colosseum and the 3rd military action that he's having, and with that I just also wanted to have the second warrior that I have the chance to get for free. I wanted to have it available. I will then go for Hippocrates. I was willing to take the knights here. I'm playing against Sun Tzu, so it could just be important to have the knights. There is Genghis Khan, but I don't want to be dependent on him. And while I could have a chance to take the knights at the next turn, it could be that those might stay on 2 civil actions, potentially. It could of course also be that Gandin will deny them, but I was not too worried about that, but rather that maybe they will stay on 2 civil actions. Now I just have the chance for certain to take them for 1 civil action. And also Gandin at his next turn maybe doesn't have the most things to do. He can finish the Colosseum, increase his population. Of course, if he gets some additional food, he can increase his population 2 times, maybe build a second lab. But maybe it could have been nice for him to have the chance to grab the knights for 1 civil action at the next turn, and maybe he doesn't have the greatest alternatives available now, especially because I will take another card away from him, which I think is a bit more questionable as a civil action spent for me. I will also take the cultural heritage. I mean, I have the Stonehenge that will require a lot of civil actions to be built, and I have a lot of science then thanks to that, so I do think it's a bit of a questionable investment of my civil actions to take the cultural heritage here. On the other hand, as said, Gandin maybe doesn't have the most things to do, and now maybe it could be a bit annoying on how he wants to spend his civil actions. Maybe just takes the breakthrough for 2, but at least that's a little bit less efficient than taking the cultural heritage for 1. So at the end, as I thought this additional science can always still be valuable. Could be nice to have for Gandin, and so at the end I was willing to take it, but I could have maybe also just built a step of the Stonehenge. We will see at the next turn that I will actually have a bit of a corruption issue, and that maybe originated in me taking the cultural heritage here instead of just building a step and being more civil action efficient. And I do think it's not that important to deny that card here. even though it might have some effects to Gandin, and he might be willing to take it, but I do think it maybe was a mistake to take it here, or just inaccuracy. I will draw 2 more cards, the Legion Tactic and the Pestilence, Gandin Seeds, and opens the Development of Science. So now both of us delaying the lab is maybe not that heavily punished. I mean, I have some additional science from the Stonehenge available anyway. Gandin finishes the Colosseum, that allows him to get out of corruption, and then he just takes the irrigation and the breakthrough. Now it is my turn, and I, as you can see, will actually seed the Pestilence, which looks a little bit weird with playing against Sun, so maybe I don't necessarily have an interest in pushing the deck forward. And also the Pestilence could be a bit tricky. I mean, our food situation at the moment is looking relatively similar, but Gandin has already a copy of Irrigation in hand. If he's willing to go for Yanshishka for 2 civil actions at the next turn, which would be a bit costly for him, so I was hoping that he won't be willing to do that, but then he maybe has a way to get more and to build up his military more efficiently, meaning that maybe the population loss is less costly for him. But I was still willing to see it, at least I will have the knowledge about it, can maybe prepare for it, and also I just wanted to, I was hoping for a development that might make my turn a little bit more pleasant, because at this point I am faced with an awkward decision. I have only enough food to increase my population 1 time, so that doesn't really help me that much to get out of corruption. I could increase my population, build a religion, build 2 steps of the Stonehenge without the engineering genius. That would be enough to get out of corruption. Maybe I could have potentially just done that, but building the religion doesn't feel great. And I was hoping that maybe with some additional food revealed, or just a way to also development of settlement, development of civil life, with some of those cards. Development of markets, trade routes, all that gives me additional food could be nice here to allow me to just increase my population 2 times and build a 2nd lab. So I was hoping for one of those events with the Pestilence, but sadly the development of crafts is revealed. Because if none of those things is revealed, I could just finish the Stonehenge to get out of corruption, but if I finish it with the engineering genius, I would still have corruption. So to get out of corruption, I would have to finish it without it, and at this point, it was very unclear for me if I will have another chance to use the engineering genius. Sadly, as you can see, none of those cards that gives me additional population of food is revealed. Instead of development of crafts, and yeah, with that, even though I didn't like it that much, I just made a decision to finish the Stonehenge here with the engineering genius and take corruption. Now I would have even had to take corruption if I would have finished it without the engineering genius, and I just didn't have any nice way to get out of corruption here, so I just use my civil actions effectively. But if you remember the turn before, if I would have built the 1st step instead of the cultural heritage, now I wouldn't have had the need to seed the Pestilence, and I could have just finished the Stonehenge and increased my population with my last civil action. So here we can see the bad consequence of me being willing to take this cultural heritage at the turn before. Also, I will reveal the Legion tactic, as I wanted to keep both the heavy cavalry tactic for Genghis Khan in case maybe Gandin goes for Yanshishka now, and also the colonization card in order to be better prepared to defend myself against aggressions. Gandin will increase his population, will now finally build the 2nd lab, increase his population again, and is willing to take the knights. Isn't willing to go for Yanshishka, maybe it was just a bit too costly. But with that, I do think my next turn is looking relatively straightforward. I will go for Yanshishka. I maybe want to have a replacement for Hippocrates anyway, and I just was too afraid of what Gandin might be able to do if I leave him Yanshishka, so I want to go for Yanshishka here. I will then elect him. I don't want to wait to collect the 3rd token of Hippocrates, and then I will just increase my population 2 times and build a 2nd lab. I could have also not built a 2nd lab and build a warrior and take one of those cards, but I don't think any of those cards is worth taking, and especially with the Pestilence coming, I don't want to unnecessarily commit to another warrior and then maybe not being able to build a 2nd lab because of this Pestilence coming. So I think that's a very clean turn, a very straightforward turn. It's of course bad that I don't have the chance to get the monarchy. At the moment the science that I've gotten out of Stonehenge is just stockpiled and isn't doing a lot for me, but I think Yanshishka is more important, and going for Yanshishka and monarchy is just not really possible. I would again have corruption, and I at the end was willing to not go for the monarchy. At least I have now the 3rd military action from Yanshishka. Maybe I still have a shot at getting the Code of Laws if I'm willing to reach out for it on the card run, and I'm on 5 civil and 3 military actions, which is maybe fine for now, and then I of course have to hope that I at some point have a chance to get into one of those H2 government forms. I will draw some cards, the medieval army tactic, which I also potentially can still go for, but I have already committed to 2 warriors, so I maybe can't make ideal use out of Yanchishka. Gandin seeds in the development of politics is revealed, 3 additional cards drawn for me, the legion tactic, but of course I have already copy and play, and then also a blunder on another colonization card. Gandin this turn goes for the irrigation, had a full hand, and maybe he wants to get out of corruption. Because of having a full hand, he can't easily go into iron, so he goes for irrigation first, which I was not too happy to see, because the pestilence is in the deck, and now with the additional farm upgrades and additional food production that Gandin is having, he might be better prepared for the pestilence than I am. But at least I have Yanchishka, and maybe don't need as many units to fulfill my tactics for the military. Now it's my turn, I'm actually the strongest. I thought it's likely that Gandin hasn't put any big strength events in there, with him not putting any effort into getting stronger, but I still thought it's nice to see it, and I was actually willing to see the uncertain borders. Maybe a bit questionable, because the Gandin has the additional food production and might still, because of this, nicely be able to get more strength than me, despite me having Yanchishka, also Nostradamus. He might go for it his next turn, but at the end I was willing to push, and I was hoping that maybe I have a shot at winning those uncertain borders. And also I can push them now before maybe Gandin goes into Nostradamus, and that means that he doesn't have knowledge about it, meaning that if I afterwards don't seed any strength events, maybe he isn't too worried about the military strength. The developed territories revealed, I wasn't willing to send both warriors here, as I know that the pestilence is coming. I was willing to send one, but it is not enough, and sadly Gandin has 3 colonization cards available and is able to win this colony, but of course he also had a lot of draws with Sun Tzu. This turn I will go for the alchemy. I can't increase my population, I don't want to build anything with the worker that I am having available, because then I don't have a free population for the pestilence any longer, and that just means that the best way to get out of corruption is to go for the alchemy. I could have also gone for Michi Castle and built 1 step, but it's a very expensive project for me with being on bronze mines, and I also thought that it could still be nice to get some economy going. While I have a lot of science saved up, I still need a government for, maybe I still want to get into Code of Laws if possible, so I thought the alchemy is still something nice to have, and I will go for 1 upgrade. Then I have 1 civil action left, and I also was willing to take the breakthrough here. Maybe I don't need it that much for myself, even though I think it's still a nice investment for only 1 civil action. And Gandin has also a lot of science saved up, but if he gets into iron now, I do think the breakthrough could have been a very nice card for him to pick, and at the end I was willing to take it for myself and also deny it from Gandin. I keep the medieval army tactic in my 2 colonization cards. I draw even another one and a colony. Maybe I can push the colony into the deck with all of those colonization cards, maybe also depending on whether Gandin goes for the cartography here. Gandin will reveal the heavy cavalry tactic, goes for Nostradamus, increases population 2 times, plays the cultural heritage before he loses it to the end of the age, wants to have the 1 additional science, and then ends his turn. I'm again the strongest, I have all of those colonization cards, the cartography will be gone. With that I was willing to push the inhabited territory into the deck here. The good harvest is revealed, again giving Gandin more food. Maybe the additional food is still quite helpful for me, so now I'm able to increase my population 1 more time. And as you can see, I was actually willing to reach out for the Code of Laws here. With the Good Harvest revealed, it's a bit more tricky to get out of corruption. Before that being revealed, I could have just taken the Code of Laws, developed it, and go for 1 lab upgrade to get out of corruption, but now sadly that isn't possible any longer. But I still was willing to go for the Code of Laws, because when we take a look at the situation, both I and Gandin have a lot of science saved up, both of us are stuck on 4 civil actions, and I do think it's just so important to get additional civil actions in 2-player games. We both have enough science so that we are maybe able to go for Code of Laws and an H2 government form without any too big problems. Maybe for me it's a bit easier, because I have those 2 science yellow cards in hand and also the alchemy going, but also for Gandin it might be possible, and if I don't take it now, I think Gandin maybe he won't go for the Code of Laws, because it's a bit tricky for him to get out of corruption. Maybe he just wants to get his iron mines going, so maybe I could gamble on him not being willing to take the Code of Laws, but I at the end thought it's just too important to have the Code of Laws, and so I was willing to go for that. And then instead of upgrading a lab, I could have upgraded a lab and built a warrior, but then again I don't have a free population for the pestilence, so I just increased my population and built a warrior. There might be at least be 1 nice thing about it, and that is that now I'm building this warrior to get out of corruption. But I might need it at some point anyway, because the Uncertain Borders are coming, an event that Gandin doesn't have knowledge about, and if there are no more strength events pushed, then as said, maybe with him not having seen the Uncertain Borders with Nostradamus, maybe just wants to go for some iron upgrades. He is maybe thinking, I just built this warrior to get out of corruption anyway, and then maybe I can now sneak a little bit of additional strength in without it looking suspicious in any form. So that could maybe at least be a nice thing about having to commit to this additional warrior. And also there's a colony coming, and then for that I maybe also want to have some additional units anyway, and can now maybe build one during H1 and use my H1 military actions for that. H2 starts, and thanks to Nostradamus, I will be able to increase my population one more time, or actually not, because the pestilence is coming, then I would be back in that part of my yellow bank anyway. Now it's Gandin's turn, he seeds, and the pestilence is now revealed. Doesn't really hurt him a lot, so that event doesn't really work out nicely for me. Gandin will then go for an iron upgrade, a second iron upgrade, increases population, so just plays a civil action efficiently here. Now it's my turn, and I have again a relatively nice event that I can push. I can seed the reds this turn, increase my population, and I'm very low on food, while Gandin has 7 food saved up. Of course he sees that I have seeded the reds and then might prepare for it the next turn, but maybe that means that he isn't pushing, isn't collecting more culture with Nostradamus, so I was really happy that I had this event to push in my hand. It also means that I have quite some knowledge about the next event deck. I have knowledge about reds, inhabited territory, and the Uncertain Borders. The knowledge of the ancients is revealed, maybe helping both of us a little bit to get into an H2 government form at some point. I will lose 1 population to the pestilence. I will increase my population because I know that the rats are coming. First I thought maybe I just want to go for 2 iron upgrades here, and then maybe either blade or cultural heritage if I want to be civil action efficient, or maybe take the drama for Bach or the engineering genius to go for an H2 wonder. And maybe that is also a nice thing to do. However, at the end, I actually went for something different. Instead of increasing my resource production, I went for another lab upgrade and took the breakthrough. I do think this turn is a little bit questionable. I do think maybe in this game I'm putting a little bit too much effort into taking every science yellow card away from Gandin. I again think that the breakthrough could have been a very nice card to take for Gandin, so I do think it's a fine play from my side. He has a lot of science saved up, but not really a big production. So after he goes for a government form, he will be quite low in science. With the breakthrough, he would have still had a very reasonable amount of science left. Also, with the breakthrough, he can more easily maybe develop 9s and still be able to go for a government form or something like this. So I do think it's fine. The additional science might also still be fine for me to have at some point. But maybe I could have also just gone for 2 iron upgrades. Even with investing into iron, I still would have had enough science left to go into an H2 government form. Maybe it could have been nice to have the drama available for Bach, even though there are of course 2 copies of Opera in 2-player games. So I don't think it's a fine turn, but I'm not 100% certain if it's actually worth it to pay the 2 civil actions for breakthrough and delay the iron upgrades. The advantage is of course that maybe if there's an early coal on the road the next turn, I can go into coal instead of iron, but I do think a 2-player game that's also not too important, can still be strong, but would also be an additional investment again, so I'm not sure about this turn, but at the end I think it's fine, as I do think the breakthrough could have still been a nice card for Gandin to have. I draw the historic territory in the popularization of science. Gandin doesn't see it, maybe also a downside, because there would have been now the chance for the inhabited territory to be revealed, for the Uncertain Borders to be revealed. Now I was a bit afraid that Gandin might use his turn to get a little bit stronger. He increases population 2 times, being now nicely prepared for reds. He very interestingly builds a religion and takes the navigation. So no, he builds this religion over going for an iron upgrade. He could take the navigation, maybe with knowing that I have seeded inhabited territory into the deck. The religion, I think, is relatively a clear sign that maybe either rebellion or immigration is coming, or maybe Gandin is afraid there is one unknown event for him in the deck, but building this religion just for this one unknown event is maybe a bit questionable, so I was kind of expecting that maybe rebellion or immigration could be one of the cards that are coming out of the deck. Now it is my turn. I see the popularization of science. I really want to push. As said, inhabited territory would be nice, the Uncertain Borders would be nice. And the event revealed is indeed the inhabited territory, which I'm able to win relatively cheaply, which I was happy about. So I just sent 1 warrior away and 2 colonization cards. And this turn I will now start going for some iron upgrades. There's no early coal, and even if there would have been one, maybe it would still just be too expensive. I go for one iron upgrade. I could go for two, but the problem is that the uncertain borders are in the deck, and now I kinda have to build up some strength without and with it looking very suspicious. Or maybe the order would have been better if the uncertain borders would have been first, but I don't want to complain with being able to win this inhabited territory very cheaply. So maybe I could just risk losing the uncertain borders and hope that Gandin doesn't increase his strength, and then at the beginning of my turn I again would have a chance to win it. On the other hand, Gandin maybe wants to push anyway with Nostradamus, with already having delayed his seed the turn before, and with knowing that if he doesn't push and the reds are maybe delayed because of that, he even loses more food. So I was hoping that maybe I can build this warrior and still have a shot at winning the uncertain borders. But it also slows, of course, my economical development down quite a bit. I can't fulfill this upgrade. I don't have enough resource to go for 2 upgrades at the next turn. I could take an efficient upgrade, but I will not end up doing this. Instead, I will take the cannons, now that I have a chance to take them for 1 civil action, and I will also take the irrigation. There's no ocean liner, so if I miss out on a selective breeding, I might be stuck on a relatively low amount of food, and with my nice yellow bank, the irrigation could be a very cheap and still a very sufficient solution for me anyway. And with taking both of those cards, sadly I don't have a chance to take the efficient upgrade. Maybe I could have taken it instead of the cannons or the irrigation, but I felt both of those cards could be important, especially because now there's a chance that I might miss out on the Rifleman. It's a card that both of us could really want, and then also being at risk of missing out on the cannons could be quite bad. And additionally, if I take the efficient upgrade, this copy of Opera will be in the discard spot. And it can always be a bit tricky, then the last one might be contested, maybe could be denied, and out of the sudden I don't have any shot at getting Bach going any longer. And with my last civil action, I just played a cultural heritage. Of course, I'm extremely vulnerable to the Dark Ages, but if we take a look at Gandin's civilization, he also isn't prepared for it, and with that I wasn't afraid of that event being in the deck. I don't take the journalisms, as I think there is not that much synergy in the game. I actually draw 2 colonization cards, and I was very happy to see that the uncertain borders are out immediately. I was very happy that those 2 event cards have been the first 2. I have now a lot of additional yellow tokens. Gandin will lose one, is now already a bit deep into his yellow bank, but he also has still a lot of repopulation lying around. If there's indeed a rebellion coming, it could be quite a bit annoying now for him to again have an unhappy worker. Gandin then just takes the Opera and Bach, so he knows that Bach is the only culture leader in the game, and it being a 2-player game, it can just be so important to have the culture leader available. And while it is very expensive, takes his whole turn, I still was definitely a bit worried about him getting Bach, being able to maybe already set up some operas the next turn, and I now have to find some solutions against this. I was really hoping that maybe I have a shot to get a government form soon. At least I will now have a shot to get the Rifleman, potentially allowing myself to punish Gandin a bit in the military, but we also shouldn't forget that Gandhi is available for Gandin to potentially go for in H3, so yeah, I was a bit worried about this Bach pick, but at least it is very expensive, and yeah, with that maybe it is somewhat fine, and I maybe can have some alternatives to play around that. After having drawn those additional colonization cards, or let's first of all, Gandin was willing to build an additional warrior during his turn. During my turn, with having drawn those colonization cards, I was willing to cede the historic territory into the deck, especially because there's Cook coming down the row, and I was thinking that Cook could actually be interesting, maybe allowing myself to win the historic territory and at least also scoring me a bit of culture, because Cook is of course also a bit of a culture leader, and not in a way that he synergizes with urban buildings, but I can still get a bit of culture production out of him, especially now after winning the strategic territory. After winning that, I have now already 2 colonies, potentially 3 soon, and with that I was really eyeing James Cook and thought he maybe could be a somewhat nice way in the situation to compete with culture against Bach. So I was very happy that I've drawn those colonization cards, allowing myself to win the strategic territory for only 1 warrior. With the strategic territory, I'm actually drawing this classic army tactic, which might give me some military potential, and as it might be nice to maybe have some potential against military potential against Bach, I was willing to take the strategy for 3, especially because I have that much science. It's just an easy investment for me, makes it that I'm nicely prepared for both Republic and Conmon. The government forms are both very late, but at least we are both somewhat suffering from it. At least I have this code of laws going, so I think grabbing it for 3 might have paid off early in the game, unless Gandin wouldn't have taken it anyway. And then in addition to the strategy, I also definitely wanted to have the rifleman available. You might argue that maybe I shouldn't have seeded because of the reds, but I just wanted to move the deck forward. And but now with the reds not being revealed, and with me actually being able to increase my population, thanks to one population going back into the yellow bank, I then with my last civil action increased my population to get out of corruption, instead of maybe upgrading this mine. But with the reds, I do think increasing the population is better here. And in the next turn with the strategy, the rifleman, the classic army, maybe I can set up a bit of a military push against a Gandin if he isn't careful. I draw 3 cards, and more tactics, but no war aggression, and also the civil unrest to potentially seed. Interestingly, there was no immigration or rebellion, so it's interesting that Gandin was willing to build his religion earlier on. The reds are revealed, which makes it that I lose less food, and now we have a very interesting turn from Gandin ahead of us. Which definitely changes the flow of the game quite a bit. First of all, we have to note that both of the government forms are still not available, so Gandin doesn't have a chance to increase the civil actions, and what he will do here is to develop the navigation, develop the knights, start building some, get a bit stronger, take the scientific method, and develop the scientific method. And that turn, I think, is a very, very clear indicator for a specific event coming, and that is the Dark Ages, because he is now 4 science left, is perfectly prepared for the Dark Ages. He has seen how much science I have saved up, and he knows that this event will be revealed quickly. So now during my turn I have to see on how I want to react to that. I definitely don't want to push. Losing that much science could just be such a big setback. So now, at least he has to invest a lot into the technologies that he doesn't really need. Can't hoard his science for government forms, might be stuck on low civil actions for a little bit longer because of that, but I have to see now how I can spend my science. And I was really hoping that maybe one of the government forms will be revealed before my next turn, because that of course would give me a very nice way to spend my science, maybe going Republic, Strategy, Rifleman or something like this. And then I have spent my science very nicely, I have my government form up and running, and I was really hoping towards something like this. And then with Gandin having to drop down low in science without having a government form, I think I might have quite a nice advantage. But the government forms are still very late, and now I have to see on how I want to react to that. First of all, I will develop the strategy. That's just a very nice technology to have, making myself a bit stronger. And then I will go for 2 iron upgrades, just getting some upgrades going. I will go for James Cook, I will elect him. There could have been Maria, I will get some irrigation upgrades or selective breeding upgrades going soon. Maybe I could have taken Robespierre in hand to at least get a government form quickly in case I will lose a lot of science to the Dark Ages. But I just felt like with Cook already giving me 3 culture per turn, which is more at least on par on what Bach will give Gandin with him having 1 opera. And soon, maybe I am having the chance to go for the historic territory and also increasing the chance to win the historic territory, which might be quite a swingy event thanks to having James Cook. I just thought James Cook is maybe the best solution for me here. And then with me knowing that maybe the Dark Ages is coming, I also was willing to develop the Rifleman already. I have a bunch of tactics for all of them. I need the Rifleman, and so I developed the Rifleman. I still have a lot of science saved up, but there are at least 2 H1 events, so there's a 50% chance that if, and first of all, maybe the Dark Ages aren't in the deck, but it was just a turn that is maybe too suspicious, or there's maybe a 50% chance that the Dark Ages are not revealed. There's of course also a chance that Gandin doesn't have an event to push, so I thought maybe instead of just developing all of my attacks, it could be beneficial to again leave myself open for a government form. If I lose now a bunch of science, it's bad, but at least I have a little bit of science left still afterwards, and so I wasn't willing to just go crazy on developing a lot of technologies, delaying my iron upgrades and stuff like that. I could now use my free military action that I'm having and upgrade one of those warriors to Rifleman. But I actually made the decision against it. I'm not 100% certain what the reasoning was. I do think maybe the reasoning was that if I go for this upgrade, I have only 6 resources available at the next turn, which is not enough to allow myself to go into 2 selective breeding upgrades in case the selective breeding should be available for me at my next turn. But maybe I have some other stuff to do anyway, and with that maybe I could have also just used my free military action here. I keep the classic army tactic, and I was happy that I draw the defensive army tactic, which could be a nice alternative to the classic army, especially with me not knowing whether I get the last copy of Cavalryman or not. Also draw the arms industry, which potentially could be an interesting event. Gandin seeds now, will there be the Dark Ages revealed? No Dark Ages yet, instead of vast territory, so Cook immediately allowing myself to at least bid a little bit more for this. But 6 is not enough. Gandin has the navigation, at least he has to send a colonization card away, meaning that he won't have that card available for the historic territory. He will then go for an upgrade, builds another knight, going up to 14 strength, and he just takes the Conmon away. Not necessarily because he really wants to secure it for himself, it's of course also important for that regard, but the problem is if he doesn't take it, with maybe sensing that Dark Ages are coming, could have a very nice way to spend my science. Well, now there's at least a chance, 60% chance, that the Republic stays in the deck and that I maybe either get hit by big Dark Ages or I have to commit to a lot of technologies, which also then as a result would mean that maybe I can't easily get into Republic. So I do think it's probably right for Gandin to take the Conmon. First of all, of course, he secures this technology for himself, making sure that he isn't stuck on despotism any longer. And of course, he still needs some time to be able to develop the Conmon. But maybe the more important thing is to at least make it possible that I might not have the chance to spend my science into a government form. And again, I was really hoping that maybe the Republic will be revealed so that I can go into a government form, and sadly there's no Republic revealed, and this turn again I had to think about, do I want to just spend all of my science into a bunch of technologies, or am I willing to just lose a bunch and maybe still have a bit more saved up? But now with the Dark Ages very likely being the top card, I just was at the end willing to just develop a bunch of technology, spend all of my science, and but it's still bad. So while maybe at the end I don't get hit by the Dark Ages very heavily in regards of what the amount of science that I lose, it's still bad in the sense that it still prevents me maybe from getting into a government form easily. At least the same is also a bit true for Gandin, but he has soon 6 science production, which I can't match because I don't have the urban building limit to build a 3rd lab, so he might have it a little bit easier to get into Conmon than I to get into the Republic. So I take the architecture, that has definitely the potential to save me a bunch of resource in case I still want to go for some urban buildings. I develop the cannons as I need the technology for the defensive army tactic that I have drawn. And then I will also go for the irrigation and for 1 upgrade, meaning that after my turn I will only lose 1 science in case the Dark Ages are revealed. With my last military action that I'm having, I think I may be making a mistake here. It's not a clear mistake, but I do think it's maybe a mistake, because I just developed a cannons and I now make the decision to actually build a cannon. And I do think that makes sense, because for the defensive army tactic I need 2 warriors and a cannon anyway. But the problem is that the historic territory is coming, and with that I might send some units away anyway, so it's not that relevant on whether I build a cannon or a rifleman maybe. But if I build a rifleman, then I have the option to send a whole army away for the historic territory in case it is revealed before my next turn. In order for that to happen, both Gandin and I need to see it, but the arms industry is a nice event. Some other events might also be fine. Pushing gives some culture information, so I kind of would like to see that my next turn, if possible, especially because I know that both of those events are no strength events or something. So it could be a bit bad if I am actually willing to send an army, but now with the cannons I don't have an army available, and so I do think I should have built a rifleman here instead of the cannons. I could have also revealed the defensive army tactic already. It would cost me a draw. Maybe I should have actually done that, then I can send even more, but I definitely should have made sure that I have a tactic available to be able to bid more for the historic territory that is coming. Because Gandin at this point is not looking that military heavy, he has the heavy cavalry tactic, which gives him a bit of strength, but I was hoping maybe also with potentially having a shot at getting the wave of nationalism at the next turn, I might be able to not be in too much trouble after sending an army away for the historic territory. So I either should have revealed this tactic now, or should have just built a rifleman if I value the 3 draws more. So I keep the tactic, the arms industry, and the freedom of movement. I actually draw the mobile artillery tactic, which I was happy to see, because it could have been a strong tactic for Gandin to have. Gandin seeds, and there are indeed the Dark Ages. Everything else would have completely surprised me. Maybe Gandin, of course, could have said he goes for a weird bluff. Definitely would have had a big effect, but here the Dark Ages are actually coming, and yeah, I actually lose less science, but it still means that I am now stuck without a government form maybe for a little while longer. While Gandin, with going for more upgrade, has actually enough science to get into Conman at the next turn. The only good thing about it for me is that going for Conman at the next turn at least means that he is has 2 more turns without going for Opera, so the culture production with Bach will definitely get delayed by quite a bit, and at the moment our culture is relatively on par, so that's at least one good thing about it for me. He then takes the Breakthrough, which I think is a very valuable card for him, and then the Patriotism. It's my turn, and I now realized that maybe it was a bit bad to not have a tactic available to send away for the historic territory, and the question was, do I maybe want to skip seeding because of that, or do I just want to seed anyway? And with me having some potentially nice cards to seed, I was at the end willing to push the Arms Industry, maybe hoping to rather see the popularization of science revealed, or if the historic territory is revealed, maybe seeing that I'm actually still able to win it. The event revealed is the historic territory, and as you can see, Gandin is able to win it. I was willing to go all in, and I would have been also fine with sending all of it away, and if I either would have built a Rifleman or revealed a tactic, I could have bid 11 or even 12, maybe giving myself a shot to either win the territory or making Gandin even pay even more, so I do think that maybe ended up being quite a bit of a mistake, because this historic territory is definitely a big swing, especially in a 2-player game. Instead of me getting 11 culture, Gandin will now get 11 culture. Out of the sudden, Gandin has a bit of a culture lead. He soon will be able to go for operas, at least not at the next turn, but still soon enough. And now it maybe makes it a bit more of a burden for myself to overcome this culture lead that Gandin is having. During my turn, I take the wave of nationalism. At the moment, I'm stronger, but Gandin might rebuild some units soon, and I just wanted to have this card available. I then go for the Eiffel Tower. That's an interesting decision, but I do think it's actually a nice decision, because now I'm a bit of a problem. I'm stuck on 4 science. I can't easily get into Republic. I thought about setting up a revolution, but it just felt a little bit slow. And no. And the problem is, there's a copy of Opera coming, but if I invest 7 science into the Opera, it again takes a very long time until I can get into government form. I have a very small urban building limit, so it's the question if that will be enough to compete against Gandin. If I go for the Eiffel Tower now, I can also get quite a bit of additional culture production, also in Happy Face that might actually be relevant soon, but I can save up my science. Maybe I can just go for Revolutionary Idea on Republic. The Revolutionary Idea might be taken away by Gandin, knowing how desperately I need science. But still, I might go into Republic and at least also build up some culture. And then I have a lot of civil actions. Maybe with the Ref idea, I can still go into operas, movies, multimedias somewhat soon. And so I thought the Eiffel Tower could be nice here, and especially because I can also take it together with the Engineering Genius, which is maybe not an ideal card, because using it costs me some civil action. If I want to use it for the full resource, I even lose 2 civil actions compared to just finishing it nicely with the architecture. But I rather thought about using it for one of the 3 resource cost steps, but even then it still cost me an additional civil action. Maybe I could have also just taken the reserves, but I wanted to let the Revolutionary Radial stay on 2 civil actions for Gandin, increasing the chances that I will be able to take it, and also making it more costly in case Gandin is still willing to go for it. So I took the Engineering Genius here. With that, the Eiffel Tower is maybe somewhat manageable from the resource costs here, and it also allows myself to go for this farm upgrade. I still thought it is nice to get my food production up here, and without the Engineering Genius I wouldn't have been able to finish the Eiffel Tower the next turn, which I kind of want to do. And so I thought the Eiffel Tower is maybe a nice way to not fall too much behind in culture here, and the Happy Face might be relevant relatively soon. Here I actually make the decision to reveal the defensive army tactic. Now I'm using my free military action. Now I have the tactic available, maybe a little bit too late. Gandin can't really copy it or something. It gives a bit of information for him. Maybe the biggest downside actually of revealing it, that it makes it less easily possible for me to use the Wave of Nationalism, because now if Gandin builds just 1 more knight, which he might want to do, he's at 30 in strength, and out of the sudden I can't use the wave. At least it means that in case there are any strength events coming, I'm nicely prepared for them. So maybe Gandin wants to get stronger anyway, and I do think at the end maybe that's fine then to just use the free military action, but I thought, maybe it could be a bit bad because if I just not reveal it and Gandin builds this knight, I could potentially already use the Wave of Nationalism at the next turn, but maybe I would also miss out an additional draw with not revealing the tactic already this turn, so at the end I think it's a fine decision with potentially some downsides. I discard the tactic, keep all of those events, and draw the Modern Army tactic, which I was interested to see, because if I should have a shot at getting the Cavalryman at the next turn, maybe I can somehow set up something big with the Modern Army. There's Gandhi in the game, but if I somehow maybe get Fundamentalism or Communism, maybe with a revolution, there's definitely a shot of me being able to war, even if Gandin should be able to get Gandhi going. So I do think it's an interesting draw, and especially if the Cavalrymen are available, could maybe open up some options for me. Gandin accedes and opens the popularization of science that I seeded earlier. Sadly, that is giving him a little bit more culture now. He will go for the Conmon, increases his population 2 times, builds a knight, takes the revolutionary idea, and interestingly is taking the Cavalryman. Maybe he wants to have a way to upgrade those. It's also scoring him 2 culture with the Colosseum, and maybe he also wants to deny it from me. And that denial is actually real, because while I can go for the tanks, there's only 1 copy, and also those tanks are quite a bit more expensive. So without the Cavalryman, I was now not that confident that I will actually be able to do something with the Modern Army tactic, but of course it's still possible, and maybe I still have a shot at setting up for it. Also, there is actually Bill Gates coming down the road, which is interesting. While Bach is a very strong leader, of course an early Bill Gates could also be very strong for Gandin, but I definitely wasn't willing to deny him or anything, because then Gandin would still have Bach, which is also still a very strong leader, and I have only alchemies available. During my turn, I'm the strongest, and I was willing to push, and I think I pushed the Independence Declaration here, if I remembered correctly, which can potentially backfire, but I didn't want to push a colony with Gandin having the navigation bonus, despite myself having Cook, freedom of movement with myself. My units are already in the spot that I need to be, so for freedom of movement I thought could also backfire. So impact of progress is at the moment nice for me, but Gandin has some nice science production. I won't take the military theory, so I at the end thought maybe the Independence Declaration is still somewhat the safest event. I have this tactic, the wave, so hopefully I have good chances to not be the weakest. The event revealed now is actually the strategic territory that was ceded by Gandin, and this time I'm actually able to build it. I think I was again willing to go all in on this, but I'm actually able to even win it for just 2 units, my colonization card and 2 cards with James Cook. And now that makes it that I'm weaker, potentially allowing myself to now again be able to use the Wave of Nationalism, and I also of course get 5 additional draws going. The impact of colonies, maybe not as good as it looks at first, because Gandin actually also has 3 colonies, so at this point it's a neutral event. The impact of industry though could be interesting, also a somewhat neutral event, and I have a war, the hybrid war, so who knows if maybe I will be able to do something with that. This turn was a bit of a tricky one. But at the end I came to the conclusion, first of all, I don't want to delay the Eiffel Tower. It's a nice way for myself to get out of corruption, and I just want to get a culture production started. When we take a look at the situation, while I am, after not winning the historic territory, I'm behind in culture. At least my culture production is now at the moment better than Gandin's, and maybe I can catch up a little bit. And then I at the end thought this revolutionary idea is just too important. I thought about some other things. I thought about going into Republic, maybe setting up for a revolution, taking either opera or movies, and afterwards maybe trying to build some urban buildings. But I just wanted to stay a bit more flexible with the revolutionary idea. I have enough science to go enough to go into any H3 government form. Maybe the fundamentalism is still available in case, which could maybe allow myself to go for a bit of military pressure. The democracy, of course, could be a lot better than the republic at this point, and it is expensive, but maybe also potentially nice card for Gandin to have. And at the end I was just willing to go for that. I could maybe also just grab fundamentalism, go all into military. Gandin, of course, could go for Gandhi, but I would have done fundamentalism, but it would just feel a little bit too costly for myself at this point. Maybe I have the chance to take it for cheaper. If Gandin spends 2 civil actions to deny it, I maybe also would be somewhat fine with it. The big downside about just taking the revolutionary radius is that I miss out on both the opera and the first copy of movies, meaning it's very unclear on whether I will be able to maybe start a bit more culture production with going for some urban buildings. So I really thought about some other options, but at the end the revolutionary idea just felt best to me. I then keep the water tactic, only 1 impact. Maybe I made a bit of a mistake here. I thought the impact of colonies is equal, while the impact of industry is at the moment a little bit better. I thought maybe Gandin could actually go for Bill Gates, and then maybe even this mine will be destroyed at some point. So I do think it's fine to keep industry over colonies. On the other hand, there is the independence declaration coming before the impact of colonies will be revealed. And with me having the wave of nationalism and this tactic, now also some additional strength from both strategic territories and the strategy, I was hoping that I have good chances to be stronger, and that Gandin might lose the colony. Maybe then the impact of colonies would turn out to be the stronger event, but maybe impact of industry is the safe event, so I do think it's fine to keep. And I also kind of wanted to keep the tactic. Maybe could have also already discarded the modern army tactic, especially of course because I immediately draw a new one, but yeah, at the end I was willing to discard the impact of colonies here. I was interested to see now whether Gandin will indeed go for Bill Gates, and of course building this 3rd lab is a big indicator already, and he indeed will go for Gates. At least it means he is stuck on relatively low culture production, so maybe I will be able to overtake him in culture over the next turns, but of course he also has a lot of resources to work with from now on, which might also allow him to prepare nicely for some impacts. Also, Gandin does a very interesting decision here. At the first look I thought, oh, did Gandin just overlook that he has the chance to take air forces for 2 instead of 3 civil actions, because he actually ended up taking it for 3 civil actions from that spot. But of course at that level that we are playing at, such mistakes are not to be expected, and rather you have to think about what are actually the reasons for Gandin to maybe take the air forces here for an additional civil actions. First of all, of course, he has a full hand, but he could have played the Revolutionary Radio, for example, as his last civil action, so he could have done something different, being more civil action efficient if he takes this copy of Air Force. I do think there are 2 main reasons for that. I do think that probably the biggest reason is that the spaceflight is not in the discard spot. If it goes for that copy of Air Force, the spaceflight will be gone, and with Bill Gates and having a lot of science production, I do think the spaceflight could turn out to be a very strong wonder for Gandin, so I do think that was probably the reason for it, but it also has maybe another consequence for my turn, which I'm not sure if Gandin actually thought about it. Maybe he thought about it, but now the Air Forces will be on my discard spot instead of just being around somewhere here, meaning I have to pick them at the next turn or I won't be getting them, and at my next turn there's a lot of nice stuff that I might be able to grab. Government form, revolutionary idea, reserves, and now either I miss out on the Air Forces and take all of those nice cards, or I take the Air Forces and have to miss out on some of those cards, so that's also actually quite relevant for my next turn, so I do think quite a creative play from Gandin, and definitely not a mistake. Now it's my turn. I'm weaker, but I was hoping that there are no big strength events coming with Gandin earlier. Not really putting a lot of effort into getting stronger. He could have easily just built an additional knight, had the resources to get stronger, but didn't do it. And I didn't push any strength events, so at this point I just pushed the impact of industry in there. The event revealed is the arms industry, giving me myself 2 additional resources compared to Gandin. And this turn I really wanted to take a fundamentalism. I have this hybrid war in hand. I won't go for the tanks, I just didn't see a way how I can set up for tanks plus air forces. And if I only go for tanks, then just going for defensive army with air force could be better, especially because I still have a chance to draw something like entrenchments or positional army. And with me having some military potential, I wanted to go for the fundamentalism here, especially because if I now put some military pressure on Gandin, maybe with me having a lot bigger culture production, I can just generate a culture lead, while Gandin maybe has to react a little bit to my military push. At least that is what I was hoping. And also I don't know when the other government forms will be coming. I could just take the fundamentalism in hand. Maybe keep a bit more science production, not commit to it yet, maybe set up for revolution even. But I just wanted to get additional civil actions going already this turn, especially because that allows myself to a lot more easily take the second copy of Revolutionary Idea, already making up for the science that I'm actually losing from the fundamentalism. I still can go for air forces in 2 turns, making myself somewhat threatening if I maybe go for defensive army tactics with air force, and I can maybe also threaten positional or entrenchment tactics, positional army or entrenchment tactics with air forces. So I wanted to get this going. And then I also kind of have to get out of corruption. I can do that with just increasing population once and building 2 units. And then I kind of definitely wanted to have the Air Force, as that might just give myself a very big additional, a lot more strength potential, especially if I should draw something like those positional army or entrenchment tactics. But as you can see, if Gandin would have taken the other copy of Air Force, now he could have just taken the reserves and maybe grabbed the Air Force at the following turn. I do think this copy of reserves would be extremely helpful for me, because building up a bunch of units will be extremely costly, and while I have the wave, it's also at this point really not certain whether I find a nice way to use the wave. Maybe I could have played my turn differently, but I do think I kind of need this rev idea, fundamentalism, air forces, and then there's just not enough space left to use the wave nicely. And yeah, so I do think Gandin taking the air force for an additional civil action has actually quite an effect here. But the good news is, I am now at 25 strength, maybe Gandin has to react to that, maybe he needs to be safe from an aggression, prepare for a potential war, while I will, at this point, overtake him in culture. Of course, he will get the Bill Gates bonus, I haven't really overtaken him yet, but I was hoping that with me putting a bit of pressure with the military, either I can even pull off a war, or it will just distract Gandin from using his resource to build up some culture, and maybe he instead has to build some military. I draw some cards, and a draw that I was very happy about. Impact of government is a relatively neutral event, but the impact of culture could be a very big one, so I was really happy about drawing that. Gandin seeds, and the event revealed is the economic progress, maybe another reason why he was willing to go for Bill Gates. Now he gets even more resources out of him. Has now 22 resource saved up, he plays the revolutionary idea, makes space in his hand, goes for the civil service, that will help him to get out of corruption, and now he also is at 8 instead of only 6 civil actions, takes the tanks, develops them, scores some culture with the Colosseum, and with upgrading he first of all is able to get out of corruption nicely, still draws 3 cards, and maybe is now not longer in danger of an aggression. He passes into spaceflight now, meaning one of the reasons why he maybe took the air forces for more expensive is now not really fulfilled, and now he didn't find a space to go for it, but one wonder that might also be strong for him is actually the Empire State Building and potentially also the internet. Now it's my turn, and while it is somewhat risky, I was willing to cede the impact of culture, especially because maybe if I cede it now I actually have better chances to win it, because at some point I will lose James Cook, and Gandin might have, maybe with the resource, the ability to build up a bunch of culture production, but now when it is in here, maybe it will be revealed why I still have James Cook, and I was just willing to potentially be at the risk of not winning it, as I was still a bit worried about the many resources that Gandin has, and especially there's the Empire State Building now on the row. I actually thought about denying it, but just didn't find a nice way on how I will be able to nicely build it. It just felt way too expensive at the end, and Gandin can just go for the internet and might potentially make that relatively big. So I thought it's just too expensive, but not taking it will now mean that Gandin will take the Empire State Building, which he will at least be able to finish for 21 points. At the moment he's winning resource and science, and he can easily win food with just building an additional farm. Maybe I at least can prevent him winning culture or strength, but he can't finish it for 21. I might not have the ability to finish a wonder nicely, as I can't really go for internet or Hollywood. So I just thought I need maybe the additional points here from the impact, and if I need them maybe anyway, now with pushing it now I have the better chance to win it, and maybe later on. The prosperity is revealed, giving some additional food for both of us. And as I said, I considered taking the Empire State Building but decided against it. Instead I will increase my population 2 times, take the reserves, I will get out of corruption with building some units, increase my population again, and I will also take the military build-up, just setting myself up in a way to maybe threaten a bunch of military at this point. It's questionable if I will be able to use the wave of nationalism in the military build-up, but the other cards apart from the military build-up I maybe don't really need. I could have just increased my population 2 more times, so that would have been a very fair use out of my civil actions, but if Gandin takes the military build-up he can a lot more easily defend. He has lots of resource anyway, but then he can maybe build an opera and still have reasonable amounts of resource left to defend himself. So it's a bit of a denial, and at least if Gandin maybe wants to get stronger for some reason, I can now use it nicely. So maybe also with revealing a tactic potentially, and then copying back to the defensive army tactic at some point. So I was willing to go for it, and I was hoping that maybe I could have a shot at drawing something like positional army on entrenchments. I thought about building a cannon instead of the rifleman because of potentially drawing entrenchments, but I don't need a cannon for the defensive army tactics, so at the end I rather went with the additional rifleman. Also with building all of those units, those were mainly done to get out of corruption, but it might also have an effect to Gandin, because he was careful about getting close in strength. He has sent some colonization cards away for colonies, meaning maybe he can't defend himself, and again is somewhat forced to invest a bit into military. Again, he has a lot of resources, not that costly for him, but still it might have a bit of an effect on him. I don't draw a tactic, but what I do draw is the impact of strength, which also could potentially be a very nice impact, especially because I have now the wave and the military build-up in hand, meaning that if Gandin at some point overtakes me, I can easily maybe get stronger again, so I was very happy about that draw. Gandin cedes, the Independence Declaration is revealed, he will lose the developed territory, which is definitely a bit annoying for him, makes it more difficult for him to get out of corruption, can't maybe lose a little bit of food at some point because of the yellow token loss. And he will increase his population and builds an additional religion, maybe for a little bit of additional culture reduction. Maybe he's afraid of some impacts like impact of balance, even though that's also not really a good impact for myself. He takes 2 cards, not more, meaning that at my turn I actually have the ability to anti-age if I want to, but it would be very costly. I have 7 civil actions, I would need to spend 6 of them to take 2 cards from here, 2 cards from here, and 1 to make space in my hand. And also I need to elect Marlene Dietrich already, which cost me 4 culture from Cook. Marlene isn't really doing that much for me. And then I would be able to anti-age. I still definitely considered it very heavily, because while Gandin of course gets the Empire State Building the Bill Gates bonus, I will get very likely then, or almost for certain then, plus 10 from impact of culture, plus 10 from impact of strength, and I have quite a bunch of impact knowledge, and there are not that many impacts that would be very bad, at least not after I have finished my last turn. There's the impact of science, which would be very bad, but there are some impacts that could punish me quite heavily if those are revealed before my next turn, and those are the impact of harmony, which at the moment is plus 12 for Gandin, and also the impact of happiness, which is better for Gandin at this point. And at the next turn I could then maybe build a bunch of religions and make both impact of happiness and harmony better. But I thought I had actually maybe good chances to win if I anti-age now, but there are definitely some combination of impacts, and especially if some of those impacts are revealed before my next turn, that would just lose me the game. And at the end I thought that maybe it's better to not prolong it, just get more culture from Cook, be able to play an actually reasonable turn, and also with not going for Marlene, who could still be a very nice leader, maybe to threaten more military, but I didn't see anything concrete, and Gandin has just so many resources, he might still threaten to just defend. I mean, with the hybrid war, maybe losing that war slightly is not too bad, and I can prevent him from finishing the Empire State Building, so I thought about some of those things, but didn't like them too much at the end. Maybe I could have somehow tried to set something up with that, but instead I rather aim towards getting Pierre, or maybe even Sid Meier, if I get him together with computers, but also Pierre just for the Olympic Games. At the next turn keeping the culture from Cook, and also just while Gandin has those many resources and might set up nicely, if he has an additional turn, I at least get more culture every turn, the Olympic Games from Pierre, so at the end I wasn't willing to NDH and was hoping that I have better chances to win when I prolong the game a little bit. I cede actually the impact of strength. It's definitely a commitment, but with the military build-up, I felt confident enough to already put it into the deck. The impact of industry is revealed. If that would have been the impact of colonies, I would have gotten now plus 3 instead of plus 1, so that maybe was a slight mistake in hindsight. I start the turn with taking endowment. I could have just taken a bunch of cards as set and NDH, but I didn't do it at the end. I still wanted to take the endowment. There's a chance that actually Gandin will just always be behind me in culture, but if that should happen, at least maybe it's looking somewhat nice for me anyway, and if he is able to overtake me, then I have the 6 additional culture in my pocket, but I also denied, of course, from Gandin, so that he doesn't have a cheap way to get 6 additional culture just for 2 civil actions. So I take that, I increase my population 2 times, I build an additional rifleman. I could have also upgraded one, which would be enough to get out of corruption, but again I wanted to put a bit of pressure on Gandin with potential aggressions. I maybe need to build this anyway, because the impact of strength is coming, and it also makes it a bit harder for Gandin to get the strength bonus from the Empire State Building, and then there's not that much else for me to do. And at the end, I just took the democracy as a denial pick because Gandin has a lot of science saved up, and then the democracy might still score him 6 additional culture. Might make him also a bit weaker for the military, but he can still use the military action from the common at the next turn with going for an upgrade before replacing the government form. And then I just wanted to deny that card from him. And then with the last civil action, I just played the revolutionary idea as I have a full hand. So that's the end of my turn. I will get one last draw. The moment impact of government and population could be somewhat neutral impact. I also draw the impact of agriculture, which is also a neutral impact at the moment, but Gandin might build an additional farm to win the food category for the Empire State Building. Also, I do draw a normal war. Sadly, I didn't really find a nice way to actually threaten a lot of military for a war, because I just can't use wave and military buildup, and the reserves alone don't give me that much resources, so that I can't really threaten 2 armies with air force or something like this. Maybe I could have done it with Marlene, but I didn't want to commit too heavily into a war direction, and rather wanted to leave myself open for Pierre or Sid Meier. The impact of culture is revealed, meaning that now I actually have a bit of a lead, and I was really happy that that impact worked out for me. Gandin uses the last chance to play the patriotism from H2, goes for some upgrades, takes the urban growth, the bro sports interestingly. Maybe he doesn't have that much to do with this turn anyway. That could especially be the case in case the impact of harmony is in there. In which case Gandin can't just disband any mines and maybe build operas and stuff, or he can only do it with losing culture from harmony. Maybe he could have gone into computers and for some upgrades potentially, because I'm not sure how much the bro spot denial is doing, but it of course also depends on what impacts Gandin has in the deck. If there's impact of happiness or impact of competition, I have knowledge that impact of architecture isn't in there, then it might maybe be a denial that's worth it, especially with me getting Pierre, but I need 3 civil actions to take and elect Pierre. I can't easily build a bro spots immediately, but maybe I could actually build 1, get a bit of additional strength, and then build more, be nicely prepared for some impact. So maybe it's at the end worth it for him to deny it, even though it means that he can't go for some computer upgrades for maybe some additional points with Bill Gates at the end of the game. And then he also takes a copy of movies. Now it's my turn, and I at this point thought I have relatively good chances to win, even though it's definitely not certain. But with me thinking that I at least have good chances, I made the decision to play it a bit safer here, because this turn I will build some religions. I thought it is very important, because some of the worst impacts for me are, as said, happiness and especially harmony, and I will fix those impacts now. And especially with Gandin not being willing to destroy anything, it kind of was an indicator like impact of harmony might be in there. That impact of harmony will be in there, and with that I have only neutral impacts in hand. I could seed them for the 3 culture for seeding, but at this point I just didn't want to risk that either impact of happiness or especially harmony will be revealed now, and so I passed the politics phase. I could have played a raid, but I rather wanted to keep 1 aggression in hand. I will get a bit stronger this turn, and if Gandin doesn't react, and I maybe again at the next turn don't want to push, then I could play the aggression at the next turn with it actually being potentially successful. I would just remove some cards from Gandin now anyway, so I don't think that has a big effect. And I had to think about whether I want to go for Sid Meier or for Pierre. I could go for Sid Meier, go for computers, go for 2 upgrades if I don't build this religion. And then actually Sid Meier would give me 6 culture this turn and at the next turn. So more than the 8 from the Olympic Games from Pierre, but then I can't go for multimedia, and way more importantly, I can't build those religions. I still thought about just going for Sid Meier, but if I build those religions, I think Pierre is the better choice. And I do think building those religions is just too important, as it fixes some of my weakest impacts. So I built 2 of them, and then I said I go for Pierre instead of Sid Meier. And then for my last 2 civil actions, maybe I make a bit of a mistake. First of all, I will go for upgrading this warrior to rifleman. With the reserves, I still have enough resource left to maybe go into something like multimedia. I wanted to upgrade this because I wanted to make it more difficult for Gandin to win the strength category. Now he can't just go for 2 upgrades, he actually has to destroy something and maybe build something, especially if the impact of harmony is in there and not revealed before his next turn. It could be a bit annoying, so if I don't go for this upgrade, he could just go for 2 upgrades here, and that would be enough to overtake me in strength. So I do think that makes sense. At the end, I made the decision to take the multimedia, and I don't think it's a mistake, but I maybe missed out on one option, and that is that I have at the moment two neutral impacts in hand, impact of population and government. So I thought, no, I can just maybe seed government, build a multimedia, but I have actually the ability to maybe play the reserves for food, make the impact of population better, and then instead of building a multimedia, maybe just building two more religions, which only is one culture less, but it increases my impact of happiness. And while multimedia also helps for some impacts, impact of variety is somewhat nice for me anyway, and impact of architecture I have in my hand for impact of balance. It makes a difference, but it's not a big impact from Gandin again anyway, unless he builds a movie. So I do think it's fine to take the multimedia in hand. Then with taking the multimedia, I thought maybe I don't need the satellites, because if I should need some strength, maybe I can just go for Air Force, build a military build-up, and that helps me for variety, the same as satellites would do. And if not, I will go for the multimedia, which would help me for variety, the same as satellites would do, and I have discarded the impact of progress earlier on. But with this idea of building some religions, I think maybe I should have taken the satellites in hand, to just that I can develop the satellites, build those religions, be prepared for harmony, and have the two additional culture, and be prepared for happiness. So maybe I could have taken it. On the other hand, maybe I will need also some civil actions. Maybe I could have taken it instead of the multimedia, but it will a lot depend on whether Gandin will seed, what impact is already out. If Gandin seeds and actually gets stronger, I can't push at my turn, then getting an additional population because of the impact of strength. Then getting an additional population doesn't make a difference, so it depends a lot on some things, but I underestimated, or I didn't really think about the ability of increasing my population additional time at the next turn, in which case the multimedia isn't doing that much, and maybe satellites could be more valuable, but there are definitely some scenarios where still it could be quite nice to build a multimedia. I could have maybe made it a little bit harder for Gandin to win the food category, but would be some resource missing that I can spend elsewhere, and at least he has to destroy something in order to achieve it, so at the end I was fine with that. Gandin won't push, interestingly, doesn't maybe have a nice impact, which is maybe a bit unfortunate, but I mean his balance is not that great. Maybe there are actually not that many nice impacts. Oh, that looks like a little bit of a bug. He is building a very big farm. I hope that doesn't count extra for the impact of agriculture, but at least I have that one in hand. Yeah, I don't think that happened during playing the game, but yeah, that's a bit funny. Gandin then destroys the temple. Not destroying a mine is a big indicator that impact of harmony is in there. He's actually willing to sacrifice a culture, and then he is going for some upgrades with building the pro sports. He also overtake mean strength, meaning he is now able to win the Empire State Building for 28 culture, but he wasn't really able to build any movies. He's only producing one culture, so I think overall that is fine for me. And the good news is also with him not pushing, I'm actually able to push without there being the risk of impact of strength being revealed. Otherwise, I probably would have to skip pushing, or if I realized that I actually don't have that good chance to win, I maybe would have to need to take the risk. But now I can see the impact of population, and I'm not in risk of the impact of strength being revealed. There's still an impact revealed that I will improve during my turn, or I could improve, and would have improved that if that one would still be potentially in the deck. But like this, it's out, but I would have only made it up to 20, so I do think it's fine. And then during my turn, with also declaring Olympic Games with PS, you can see I have actually more culture than Gandin already at the start of my turn, so I can't use the endowment. I will play the reserves for food to increase my population. And with Gandin having gotten stronger, and with me not having the satellites in hand, I now need to go for an additional unit, and the Air Forces, as I just built some religions anyway, no multimedia, because I cannot just score 2 additional culture of impact of pop with playing reserves for food instead of resources. I just developed the Air Forces, gives me +2 for variety, a little bit more for impact of competition, which definitely could be in there, could be one of the reasons why Gandin deny the pro sports, and also him building that pro sports now, and those tanks might be an indicator, of course, or might be done just because of the Empire State Building, but definitely could also be because of the impact of competition. So I built this Air Force, and now that the impact of harmony is out, I can completely, without any downside, destroy this mine and just build another religion, improving my impact of happiness and also my overall culture production. And now, before the final impacts, we can see that I have quite a bit of a lead, but it's also not that big of a lead. Gandin will get +6 from the Bill Gates bonus, so I'm only 10 points behind, but the good news is that the impact of strength is in there, the impact of population, so Gandin has only 2 impacts in order to catch up the lead that I'm having. The first impact is the impact of competition. That one is indeed in there, giving Gandin +6 against me. Then we have the impact of strength, which gives me +10, so I have now a 20 culture lead, which is nice. But of course there's the Brigades bonus coming. The impact of population gives me +2 after me being willing to play the reserves for food and increasing my population additional time. And that means for the last impact, it's the impact of science, a good one. But even with that good one, at the end, Gandin is not able to win against me. Maybe would have needed another seed plus another impact, like impact of happiness, that gives him some culture. If he would have something like this, he could have seeded. The impact of harmony wouldn't have changed. Maybe I even would have need to skip seeding potentially, and then if he has one more nice impact, he definitely could have won. So no, at the end I'm able to win it, which I'm very happy about. Definitely a bit lucky with the impact draws. Having both impact of culture and strength helped me a lot out there, and Gandin at the end not being able to push an impact. I had a lot of impact knowledge, and maybe Gandin just needed a little bit more luck in that regard in order to win. Also, he told in the chat after the game that sadly he didn't have any H2 or 3 tactic until the very end, so that of course made it maybe a bit more tricky. At least he had the upgraded heavy cavalry tactic, so that's at least on the same amount of strength as something like Conquistadors, which is of course not a great tactic, but at least something to work with. Only one less than my defensive army tactic, but still no tactic definitely is very limiting. And no, so in a very interesting game. It took an interesting turn with the turn where Gandin prepared for Dark Ages. Out of the sudden, we both played around that event very heavily and really made it more difficult to get into government form. And at the end, it was maybe somewhat fine for me with getting the fundamentalism early in H3, with building the Eiffel Tower and having James Cook. I generated a bit of a culture lead and maybe put a bit of pressure on Gandin, making it that he can't easily just build a lot of culture urban buildings. And then at the end, it was just enough. Gandin managed to finish a very strong Empire State building, but with a bit of impact luck of draws for the impacts, I at the end was able to win this game, which I'm happy about. And now with the last game being finished, we can now take a look at the final standings of the group. And as you can see, with this win in the last 2-player game, and with me actually being able to win all of the 2-player games, I'm still in a spot where I almost made it to win the group, but sadly it's just not enough. Jandrik wins the tiebreaker against me, and with that I sadly will go into the lower bracket already for stage 5 of the tournament. So not the outcome for the group that I would have hoped towards, but there were already some strong opponents, very high rated opponents, and I think it was definitely a very interesting group, very close. It could have gone into a lot of different directions. If I maybe would have just got a little bit more points in this game, I could have maybe made. On the other hand, I could have of course also easily lost my 2-player games against Kogito or Gandin. So every game that was somewhat close in any regard of course could have changed the standings a little bit, which already could lead to a different outcome. So I think a very close group, and definitely some interesting and fun games. And Fjandrik at the end is the one to make it up into the upper bracket for the next round. But I think all players played very well. Kogito at the end is quite behind the standings, but I don't think that really reflects on how well he played compared to the other players in the stage, because I do think he had some unfortunate games. Maybe games where he made some small mistakes, maybe was not as careful as he maybe should have been about the military in some of the games, but he got punished a lot more heavily than compared to how maybe big those mistakes were. I think those were maybe small misplays, maybe that he made, just as all of the others in this group maybe also made in some situations, but he got punished very, very heavily with the 4-player game. He got punished for the military. The 3-player game, they got punished in the military very heavily, and then also in my 2-player game, maybe making a small mistake at the end, seeding, opening the prosperity. But I couldn't defend against an aggression. I just had one aggression where him having corruption because of prosperity actually made a difference. So he, I think, this round got very, very heavily punished for maybe small misplays. So I do think if things go a bit more normal for him, the whole standings would be a lot closer. And I don't think the big gap in the points does reflects the skill difference in how well he played compared to the rest of us in this group. And yeah, so that is the end of the round. Well played to everyone. Congratulations to Fjantarik to making it to the upper bracket of the next stage. Of course, I'm a bit unhappy going into the lower bracket. In general, my results haven't been great recently. Getting relegated in a bunch of those tournaments like Intermezzo International and Royal League. At least in Intermezzo, I immediately made it back into Grandmaster, but in International, I even got relegated in Platinum. So definitely not ideal results. I was really hoping to maybe now get some nice results going again, and I really put a lot of focus into those games. So definitely yeah, put my best into those games, but at the end I wasn't able to do it very closely. Only 1 point was missing. But the good news is I still am in the tournament. There is the lower bracket, and the world champion from last year, Matapashe, also went into the lower bracket very early. So maybe that's just the best strategy anyway. And yeah, the groups for the lower bracket have already been revealed. The games will start on Monday, so maybe in around 2 or 3 weeks you can expect the next World Championship video. Until then, there is one more video that I've definitely planned, a video that was voted for by my Patreon supporters, and then I will see if I maybe post some other tournament games. Maybe I will also take a little bit of a break now after I have uploaded a lot of videos in the recent days. But especially because I will be 1 week away, so you maybe have to expect a little bit less content for the next 2 or 3 weeks. But then soon we will be back with stage 5, which hopefully will be very exciting. Alright, then I say thanks for watching, thanks for following me through the first stage that I have to play in this tournament, and then have a nice time and see you in the next video.